Marijuana stocks took a major hit in 2021, and with federal legalization of recreational cannabis still on the fence in the U.S., many cannabis companies are not living up to investors' expectations. While some investors are tapping out of the pot market, could 2022 be an opportunity to tap in? Hi, I'm Des with the Motley Fool. I spoke with Keith Speights about the different challenges and opportunities in the world of cannabis and the cannabis industry, and what to expect in 2022 as the pot industry continues to expand and grow.
Cannabis stocks initially soared early in the year in 2021. For example, Canadian cannabis producer Sundial Growers emerged as a meme stock, and it skyrocketed more than 500% by mid-February. And then everything fell apart. And so what happened? Well, first of all, vaccines helped, but the pandemic didn't end, of course, and we had the spread of new coronavirus variants. There was the Delta variant and now the Omicron variant. The Canadian cannabis industry experienced some really significant supply-demand imbalances that kind of messed things up there. The valuations of cannabis stocks in general really just seem to have gotten ahead of the market realities, and we just saw a big downturn in most cannabis stocks after the beginning of last year. Now, going into 2022, the political dynamics really don't give a lot of reason to be overly optimistic about near-term changes to federal cannabis laws. And of course, COVID-19 cases continue to hit record highs in many areas due to the Omicron variant. And unfortunately for investors, many of these challenges that caused cannabis stocks to plunge last year are still present.
While most cannabis companies have failed to live up to certain expectations, there are a few pot stocks that have stood out and seized the opportunity of expansion and growth. Which pot stocks stood out to you the most?
Yeah, Des, there really are still some great opportunities with cannabis stocks, even after the pretty much abysmal returns overall last year. Now, I will say that Canadian cannabis stocks, such as Canopy Growth and Sundial Growers, they're probably not going to perform as well. They can't jump into the U.S. marijuana market yet, and it's probably not going to happen as quickly as many investors had hoped. That restriction really limits the growth prospects for these Canadian pot stocks, at least over the near term. But the sell-off in 2021 really has given some U.S. cannabis stocks really attractive valuations. I'll point out two particularly. Cresco Labs shares trade at less than 2.5 times trailing 12-month sales. This company is already profitable. It expects strong growth in 2022. I think this is a stock that investors really should take a hard look at. Another U.S. multi-state operator, Air Wellness, is even cheaper than Cresco. Air's shares trade below 2.4 times sales, which is really low. And unlike Canadian companies such as Canopy Growth, Air already generates positive adjusted EBITDA, as you were mentioning, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And this company also continues to see robust growth. So I think those are two U.S. stocks that investors really should take a look at. And it's also important to note, Des, that there were some cannabis stocks that did quite well last year. Some delivered tremendous gains. And they still have solid prospects for this year. A case in point would be Innovative Industrial Properties. This stock has beaten the overall market for 5 consecutive years. Its shares soared nearly 44% last year. All Innovative Industrial Properties needs to do to keep up those winning ways is just to find more cannabis properties to buy and lease back to operators. I don't think that's going to be a very difficult task for IIP to achieve this year.
What factors do you think should be considered for those who are considering investing in the cannabis industry today?
Well, let me just first say that some investors are better off staying away from cannabis stocks. I mean, let's just be realistic and honest here, right? If you're a risk-averse investor, you're not going to like pot stocks. They're very risky, and we were talking about some of the challenges from 2021 have not faded away, and so most of these cannabis stocks aren't going to appeal to investors who can't tolerate pretty high levels of risk. I would also say that investors should stay away from most of the Canadian cannabis stocks, at least for now. My view is that the headwinds that are facing these stocks, especially that inability to enter the U.S. cannabis market, that's going to probably continue to hamper their performances. So I think for the most part, the Canadian stocks are probably best to avoid, at least for now. On the other hand, aggressive investors who are willing to take on relatively high levels of risk should be able to find some bargains and some really great stocks in the U.S. cannabis sector. I would definitely put Air and Cresco in that group. And I also think long-term investors can still win big time by buying strong ancillary stocks such as innovative industrial properties. Now, I will say, Des, there's no guarantee that 2022 is going to bring smooth sailing for cannabis stocks, whether U.S. or Canadian stocks in general. It probably won't. But I do think that there are some cannabis stocks that could be in a great position to navigate these still treacherous waters and deliver pretty solid returns for investors both this year and over the long run.